So in this series we will read the Insights Current Affairs. We will daily cover the Insights Current Affairs, the daily current affairs which is uploaded on Insights website. So let's begin. What are the topics which are there in today's news? It's Flag Satyagraha, the rescue of judges. Flag Satyagraha, rescue of judges. How are poll results challenged? And when courts have set them aside. Corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board. This is a big news. Corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board. And Children and Digital Dump Site Report. Barriers to cyclone storm. Odisha plans to plant mangroves along its coast. Like you must be knowing that mangroves are called as natural barrier to cyclones. So in this regard, there is a news which says that Odisha government plans to plant more of mangroves on its coast so as to safeguard itself from the cyclones. So there are few facts for prelims which we will read. That Indian Certification of Medical Devices Plus scheme and the Gulf of Aden and Integrated Theatre Command. So let's start. The Flag Satyagraha. The Ministry of Culture on 18 June had organized a program to observe the Flag Satyagraha in Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh. What is Flag Satyagraha? The Flag Satyagraha movement is a movement by the freedom fighters shook the British government and it infused a new life into the freedom movement. It is also called the Jhanda Satyagraha. It was held in Jabalpur and Nagpur in 1923. The news of flag hoisting in Jabalpur spread like fire in the country, and after flags were hoisted at several places across the country. So after this flag hosting ceremony which was held in Jabalpur, like there was a demand for hosting the right to host a flag all over the country. So this is a very significant movement, and it is a campaign of peaceful civil disobedience that focuses on exercising the right and freedom to host the national flag and challenge the legitimacy of British rule in India through the defiance of laws prohibiting the hosting of national flags and restricting the civil freedoms. So what were the outcomes? The arrest of nationalist protesters demanding the right to host flag caused an outcry across India, especially as Gandhi had recently been arrested. So why nationalists were arrested? Of course, because of this hoisting of the Indian national flag. So after this arrest and immediately before, Gandhiji was also arrested. So both this event led a lot of hue and cry among the masses, and nationalist leaders such as Sardar Patel, Jamnalal Bajaj, Chakravarti Rajgopalachari, that is C. Rajgopalachari, Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Vinoba Bhave organized the revolt, and thousands of people from different regions traveled. Thousands of people from different regions traveled to Nagpur and other parts of the central province to participate in civil disobedience movement. Right. In the end, the British negotiated an agreement with the Patel and other Congress leaders permitting the protesters to conduct their march unhindered and obtain the release of all those arrested. So finally, after negotiation, all the leaders were released and they also got a right to conduct their march. Next question is, so there is a section called Insta Curious. Do you know about Shivapur Dhwaja Satyagraha? So please read about this and post in comment section about Shivapur Dhwaja Satyagraha. Next, this is a prelims link section. When was the flag designed by Venkaiah officially accepted by the Indian National Congress? This is a question. And adoption of national flag by the Constituent Assembly. Flag Code of India. Overview manufacturers of Indian national flag in India. About flag protest in India. So this whole lot of things which are related to the flag can be read. So please go through this and discuss in comments. So there is also mains link, like what sort of questions with respect to this topic can be asked in mains. Discuss the key provisions of flag code in India. Flag Code of India 2002. Flag Code of India 2002 provisions has please read the provisions of Flag Code of India also. Now with respect to GS paper 2, let's look at the topic. It's a recusal of judges. So it will covered under which section of the of our syllabus. It will be covered under separation of powers between various organs, dispute redressal mechanism, and institutions. So, this is the thing. So, recusal of judges. What is the context? The Justice Indira Banerjee has recused herself from hearing a petition filed by the families of two BJP activists killed allegedly by the post-poll violence in the West Bengal. So in the news is like one of the judges has recusal means to withdraw, right? One of the judges has withdrawn herself from the case. That is Justice Indira Banerjee has withdrawn herself from the case which was with respect to the poll violence in West Bengal, right? So the background of the case is the petition alleged that there was an indiscriminate killing of innocent people in West Bengal following the election results by the vengeful ruling party of the state. Like the allegation is that the Mamata Banerjee government, after winning the election, has caused the post poll violence in the West Bengal. So in this regard, there was a case going on. So what is the judicial disqualification or recusal? So let's read about this. What does recusal mean? Okay, so judicial disqualification referred to as recusal in the act of abstaining from participating in an official action such as legal proceeding due to conflict of interest of the presiding court official or administrative officer. So when a judge abstain from hearing, abstain from petition, and this is due to the possibility of a conflict of interest, due to the conflict of interest of what is happening, one second. Okay, so due to the conflict of interest of the presiding court officials or administrative officers. So ground of what are the ground of recusals? The judge is biased in favor of one party. The ground is judge is biased in favor of one party or against another, or that a reasonable objective observer would think he might be. Okay, so interest in the subject matter or relationship with someone who is interested in it. The judge is having some kind of interest, is family interest or business interest in the subject matter, or is having any relationship with someone who is interested in the case. The background or experience such as judge's prior work as a lawyer, personal knowledge. For example, if a judge before being appointed a judge was must be a lawyer, and during those lawyer days he the accused is one of his major client. So in that case there is a possibility of conflict of interest. So personal knowledge about the parties or the fact of the case, like the person who the party of the case, for example, is the neighbor of the judge, then he will know all the personal details about the parties. So there could be a chance of either favor or bias. So ex party communication with lawyers or non-lawyers, rulings, comments or conduct. So these are all the grounds for recusal. Are there any laws in this regard with respect to recusals? There are no defined rules on recusals by the judges. However, in taking oath of office, judges, both the Supreme Court and the High Court, promises to perform their duties to deliver justice without fear or favor, affection or ill will. So there is no as such law which guides this recusal thing, but uh, but oath of but the oath of office includes such a line which imposes some kind of moral obligation on the judges to recuse in certain cases. What are the Supreme Court said on this? What has Supreme Court said on this? Justice J Chelameshwara, in his opinion, Supreme Court advocates on record association versus union. So there was some break. So Justice J Chelameshwar, in his opinion in Supreme Court, advocates on record Association versus Union of India held that where a judge has a pecuniary interest, no further inquiry as to whether there was a real danger or reasonable suspicion of bias is required to be undertaken. So, Supreme Court has said that if there is a pecuniary interest, so there is no need of inquiry whether the judge is having any sort of uh, interest, any sort of conflict of interest can be there or not. Like if it is on the face of it, it is visible that there could be a possibility of some kind of pecuniary interest. Then straight away the judge should withdraw himself from the case. So in the curious section, the thing what if judges fail to rescue themselves suo pronte and a party believes the judges has a bias. So this it is asking that what if judge failed to rescue himself suo sponte means suo motu. Suo motu means by its own without any formal authority without any formal order. So what if the judges fails to recuse out of the case, then what will happen? So in that case, I think what will happen is there will be like loss of faith in judiciary, and people will not the parties to the case will not probably believe in the unbiasedness of the judges. So this is what can be done. Anyways, the prelims links topics read about this ground for judicial disqualification. Who administers oath to the Supreme Court and High Court judges? This is very famous prelims UPSC question. Okay, and Article 127 and 128 of the Indian Constitutions are related to what? So read about this and comment in and post your comments. Then main topic is recusal has become a selective call of morality for Supreme Court. Discuss. This is very good topic. Write about it. A selective call of morality for Supreme Court judges. Discuss about it. So next topic is how are poll results challenged and when courts have set them aside. So it will cover under RPA related issues. Representation of People's Act related issues. Under this section, this topic will be covered. How are poll results challenged and when courts have set them aside. Context is West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has filed an election petition in the Calcutta High Court challenging the assembly election result of Nandigram constituency, where she had contested and lost. What's the issue? She has sought that Suvendu Adhikari's election be declared void on the ground of corrupt practices and discrepancies in the counting procedure conducted by returning officers. So you must be knowing that Mamata Banerjee lost her own seat and Suvendu Adhikari of BJP has won the seat in a very close and in a very close fight between Suvendu Adhikari and Mamata Banerjee. So Mamata Banerjee has challenged this in the Calcutta High Court. That is why this topic is in news. And what is an election petition? The post election petition के बारे में let's read. The post results and election petition is the only legal remedy available to a voter or a candidate who believes there has been malpractice in the election. An election petition submitted to the High Court. It is submitted to the High Court of the state in which the constituency is located. So it can be asked that the election petition is submitted to the district court or to the Supreme Court. So you must remember that it is submitted to the High Court, not to the district court or some other court. Okay. So such a petition has to be filed within 45 days. So it has to be filed within 45 days from the date of poll results. Nothing is entertained by courts after that. Although RPA, Representation of People's Act 1951, suggests that High Court should try to conclude the trial within 6 months. Within 6 months, it usually drags on for much longer, even years. So it is a just advisory. The time period is just advisory that you try to complete it within 6 months. But everyone knows Tariq pe Tariq. So Indian judiciary system has this Tariq pe Tariq thing. Under Section 100 of RP Act, an election petition can be filed on the grounds that Section 123 of RP Act has a detailed list of what amounts to corrupt practices. Okay, so 123 of this RP Act has a detailed list of what amounts to corrupt practices, including bribery, use of force, or coercion, appeal to vote or refrain from voting on the grounds of religion, race, community, and language. So these are all sort of offences which are listed in Representation of People Act 1951 under Section 123. And improper acceptance of nomination of the winning candidate or improper rejection of the nomination. The malpractices. So this is mentioned under Section 100 of RPA that election petition can be filed on the following grounds, like on the ground of Section 123. Okay, then improper acceptance of nomination or improper rejection of the nomination, and malpractices in the counting process. If there is some kind of malpractices in counting process, it can then petitioner can file in the High Court, which includes improper reception, refusal, or rejection of any vote, or the reception of any vote which is void. Then non-compliance with provisions of the Constitution or Representation of People Act, or any rules or orders made under the RP Act. So these are the grounds. It is mentioned under Section 100. These grounds are mentioned under Section 100. Okay. So now what happens if the court finds that it is the contention of the malpractice is correct? What happens if the court finds that contention is correct? The verdict on election petition, if found in favor of any petitioner, may result in a fresh election or the court announcing a new winner. A fresh election can be done. Fresh election भी हो सकता है वहाँ पे. Okay. Now there are some famous examples. There are many examples. The most famous being the Allahabad High Court verdict of 1975, which set aside Indira Gandhi's election from Raebareli constituency 4 years earlier on grounds of corrupt practices. Another high-profile case was that of Congress leader C.P. Joshi's loss in Rajasthan Assembly election in 2008 by one vote. So, if you want to know the Insta curious, do you know the voter casing? What voter casing is? Voter casing. This is basically voter casing is about challenging the registration of voters and abstaining them from voting. So this is just a meaning, and now read more about it. And in Insta link, like read about key provisions of Representation of People Act and roles and powers of returning officers and appeals against Election Commissioner's order. Now let's move on to next topic, the corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board, and it will be covered under effects of liberalization on the economy, challenges in the industrial policy and effect on industrial growth, and corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board. So what is the context? The context is the Union Cabinet has approved a plan to corporatize the Ordnance Factory Board. Ordnance Factory Board के बारे में पढ़ते हैं. Let's read about Ordnance Factory Board. It is an umbrella body of ordnance factories and related institutions, and currently a subordinate office of Ministry of Defence. So it is a subordinate office of Ministry of Defence. The first Indian ordnance factory was set up in the year 1712 by the Dutch company as a gunpowder factory in the West Bengal. So it was the first ordnance factory was set up by the Dutch people as a gunpowder factory in the West Bengal in the year 1712, right? So Ordnance Factory Board will be responsible for different verticals of the products, such as ammunition and explosive groups will be engaged in production of immunization, while a vehicle group will engage in production of defense, mobility and combat vehicles. So first of all, it is not mentioned over here. What does corporatization means? Like it is written over here, this is a corporatization of ordnance factory. This is not a privatization. So often people confuse the corporatization with privatization. Corporatization means you are trying to make a department of government as a public sector undertaking. Okay, now there will be shares of that undertaking, and all the shares will be held in the name of government, and there will be a CEO, there will be a managing director. So the purpose of corporatization is to enable some sense of accountability in the organization. Like railway was like, if you see, the railway is a department, but now railway is being corporatized, that it is not being sold. Its shares are with the government only. In the same way, ordnance factory board is not being sold, like it is often said in news that ordnance factory board or government is selling all these companies, but it's not selling, it's just corporatizing. The ordnance factory board is being corporatized, not being sold. So what will change? According to the plan, 41 companies will reported by 41 companies will reportedly be grouped into the new entities that will function like any other existing defense public sector undertaking. Like I said, it is the purpose is to make it a public sector undertaking, like HAL, that Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and BEL, Bharat Electronics Limited. What necessitates the restructuring? As per CAG report on ordnance factories, the production in the factories continue to fall short. Production continue to fall short of targets, and that the various ordnance factories could be achieve targets for only 49% of the items in 17-18. Okay, so targets are not being able to achieve. A significant quantity of Army's demand for some principal ammunition items remained outstanding as of 31st March 2018, which may adversely affect their operation preparedness. So thus inefficiencies. So what is the reason? What is the biggest reason? The inefficiencies in the production and delays can be deemed to be a primary reason behind the overall of Ordnance Factory Board. So significance of new structure. The restructuring is aimed at transforming the ordnance factories into productive and profitable asset. Okay, the purpose is to transform the ordnance factory into productive and profitable assets, deepen their specialization in product range, enhance competitiveness, and improve quality and cost efficiency. The restructure would help in overcoming the various shortcomings in existing system of OFB by eliminating inefficient supply chains, and providing these companies incentive to become competitive and explore new opportunities in the market. Like now, Ordnance Factory Board, once corporatized, once it becomes a PSU, it will work like it will work and compete with the private sector undertakings, and the government will support it from outside. Okay, if there is something wrong with the company, government will support it from outside, and its CEO and other person, like, will be responsible for its uh, uh, will be held accountable, that why this particular inefficiency is there in the organization. So now it will allow these companies to companies some sort of autonomy, as well as help improve accountability. Autonomy will be there and accountability will be there, and which will automatically result into which will not automatically, ideally result into increased efficiency. So what are the concerns or shortcomings of the corporatizations? So these are the benefits. Let's look at the shortcomings. Corporatization would eventually lead to privatization. The new corp eventually lead to privatization. Like it can be said that in future, like as the government is doing with LIC or some other public sector undertakings, the government may sell shares of this ordnance factory board also. But it is a future course of action. It may be a future course of action, but right now it is not being privatized. The new corporate entities would be able to survive the unique market environment of defense product that has very stable demand and supply dynamics. Restructuring will result in greater autonomy and lesser government control. Greater autonomy and lesser government control over the corporation, but there is a fear of job loss. There is a fear of job loss, as in corporate, once it is corporatized, it will look for the efficiency rather than the uh, social justice, right? So these are the some of the shortcomings of corporatization. Now in InstaCurious, let's read about corporatization and privatization. The difference between corporatization and privatization largely I have tried to explain. Now read more about it and please comment. Now next topic, children and digital dump site report. The new report titled Children and Digital Dump Site was released by the WHO. This is very important for the prelims point of view, that who releases this Children and Digital Dump Site report. So it is released by WHO, World Health Organization. Okay, so what are the key findings? More than 18 million children and adolescents working at e-waste dump site This is a huge figure. More than 18 million children are working at e-waste dump site in the low and middle income countries are potentially at risk of severe health hazard. They face risk due to discarded electronic devices or e-waste being dumped from high income countries. So that is why they are working in the waste dump site. So what are the concerns? The e-waste contains over 1000 precious metals and other substances like gold, copper, mercury, and poly polycyclic automotive hydrocarbons are found in e-waste. The processing is done in the low income countries. The processing is done in the low income countries which do not have a proper safeguarding safeguarding regulation, and which makes the process even more dangerous. The children are especially preferred at these some sites because of their small and dexterous hands. Okay, several women, including expectant mothers, also work here. Like pregnant ladies also work here. Processing e-waste exposes them as well as their children to the toxins, which can lead to premature birth and stillbirth. So, situation is very dangerous. The hazardous impact of working at such site is also experienced by families and communities that reside in the vicinity of these e-waste dump site areas. The volume of water generated across the world. The volume of e-waste generated is surging rapidly across the globe. The volume of rather than water, I think it want to say that e-waste. The volume of e-waste generated around the world is surging rapidly across the globe. About 53.6 million tons of e-waste was generated in 2019. 53.6 million ton of e-waste was generated in 2019. Only 17.4% of this e-waste was processed in formal recycling facilities. The rest of it was dumped in low or middle income countries for illegal processing by the informal workers. This is likely to increase in the coming years because of the rise in the number of smartphones and computers. So there is a huge need for this recycling of this e-waste all over the world. So what actually constitute e-waste? E-waste is a short for electronic waste. E-waste is a short for electronic waste, and the term is used to describe old, end of life, or discarded electronic appliances. It includes their components and consumables, parts and share parts. Management of e-waste in India. In India, how e-waste is managed? Laws to manage e-waste. Laws to manage e-waste have been in place in India since 2011, mandating that only authorized dismantlers and recyclers collect e-waste. Like e-waste management rule 2016 was enacted in 2017. So this e-waste management rules was enacted in 2017. The e-waste management rules was enacted in 2017. E-waste generation in India. According to the CPCB, according to the Central Pollution Control Board, India generates more than 10 lakh ton of e-waste in 2019-20, an increase from 7 lakh tons in 2017-18. Against this, the e-waste dismantling capacity has not been increased from 7.82 lakh tons since 2017-18. So there is a huge need for this e-waste recycling process. Increase in the extent of e-waste recycling process. E-waste is being generated, but its recycling is not. So in Insta Curious section, let's read about difference between brown goods and white goods. What are the white goods and what are the brown goods? So this brown goods and white goods. The brown goods include the computers, laptops, mobile phones. Like this is e-appliances, electronically used appliances, and white goods are also used from also electronic appliances, but these are some heavy items like refrigerator and washing machines. So in prelims link, read about what is e-waste, what is e-waste management rules, about the Basel Convention, other conventions related to waste management. In mains writing, write a note on the e-waste management in India, and it is this news was sourced from Down to Earth. Now next is barrier to cyclone storm. Orissa plants mangrove along its coast. What is the context? The Orissa government has proposed to raise mangroves and casuari- casuarinas plantation in the coastal belt. Previously, the mangroves served as a natural barrier to the cyclonic winds in the Bhitarkanika National Park during the cyclone Yas. You must have read about cyclone Yas, the menace of cyclone Yas. So these mangroves helped protect the Bhitarkanika National Park during the cyclone Yas. So inspiring from this event, the Odisha government is has proposed to raise mangroves. So Odisha is vulnerable to various natural disasters like cyclone, flood, hailstorm, droughts, and due to its unique geoclimatic conditions. What are the mangroves? What are the mangroves? Mangroves occur worldwide in the tropics and subtropics. It occurs worldwide in the tropics or subtropics, mainly between latitude 30 degree north and 30 degree south, with greatest mangroves area with 5 degree of the equator. A mangrove is a shrub or small tree that grows in the coastal saline or the brackish water. So mangrove is a shrub or a small tree that grows in the coastal saline or brackish water. Mangroves are salt tolerant trees, also called halophytes. This is very important. I found it very important that these are called halophytes. Mangroves are called halophytes. Halophytes, and are adapted to live in the harsh coastal conditions. They contain a complex salt filtration system and complex root system to cope with the salt water immersion and wave action. So they has some special kind of root system which help them filter this salt water and do its photosynthesis activity. And they have a blind roots in which are called they have blind roots which are called anaerobic, what we call to these blind roots. It is not written over here. Let me look into it. What we call to this blind. Okay, so these blind roots are called knee roots also, or respiratory roots, and in scientific terms it is called pneumatophores. Okay, so they have blind roots which are called pneumatophores. These roots help this tree to respire in the anaerobic soils. The seeds of mangrove forest trees germinate. The seeds germinate in the trees itself before falling. This is called viviparity model of reproduction. The trees germinate in itself. This is also very important. So there are two questions which I found important. Is the first is the salt tolerant trees. What are they called? This what we call to these salt tolerant trees. This is the first. The second is the reproductive model of mangroves. What we called it? On which model mangroves reproduce? Sorry, the it grows on which model, germinate on which model. So this is called viviparity mode of production, in which the seeds germinate in the trees itself. So what are the importance of mangroves? Mangroves roots help to impede water flow and thereby enhance the deposition of sediments in trees where it already occurring. It stabilizes the coastal shores, providing a breeding ground for fishes. Mangroves moderate monsoonal tidal floods and reduces inundation of coastal lowlands. They prevent coastal soil erosion. Mangroves help prevent the coastal soil erosion. They protect coastal lands from tsunami, hurricanes, and floods. Mangroves enhance the natural recycling of nutrients. Mangroves support numerous flora, avifauna, and wildlife. Provides a safe and favorable. Mangroves provide a safe and favorable environment for breeding, spawning, rearing of several fishes. They supply wood, firewood, medicinal plants, and edible plants to the local people. They provide numerous employment opportunities to local communities and augments their livelihoods. So it also provides employment opportunities. So, in additional information on World Environment Day, Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee announced that 50 million mangroves would be planted in the Sundarban in the near future. The mega mangrove plantation drive was taken up mainly to compensate for the plant loss during the cyclone Amphan. In Insta Curious section, have you read about black, red, and white mangroves? Read about it and post in the comment section. In the prelims link, read about mangroves, conditions for their growth, features mangroves in India and the world, benefits of mangroves. Read about all these topics. In mains link, discuss the significance of mangroves. You can write these topics which we just read, the importance of mangroves. Now, facts for prelims. Let's move to the facts. Few quick facts for the prelims. Indian Certification of Medical Devices Plus Scheme, ICMED Plus Scheme. It was launched by Quality Council of India. This is an upgraded ICMED scheme that was launched for certification of medical devices in 2016. So this ICMED Plus scheme was launched by Quality Council of India for the certification of medical devices, and which was started in 2016. The ICMED 13485 Plus, as the new scheme has been christened, will undertake verification of the quality, safety and efficacy of the medical devices. Okay, this can be asked in prelims, that they can write this term and ask that this is with respect to what. So this is with respect to the certification of medical devices. Now, Gulf of Aden. Why it is in news that Maiden Indian Navy European Union Naval Force exercise was held in Gulf of Aden recently. The Gulf of Aden, also known as Gulf of Barbera. Gulf of Aden is known as Gulf of Barbera, is a deep water gulf between Yemen to the north and Arabian Sea to the east, Djibouti to the west, and the Guardafui Channel, Socotra, Yemen and Somalia to the south. This is the Gulf of Aden. Look at the map. Let's look at the map. This is Gulf of Aden. This is Yemen. This is Somalia. And this is Somaliland. It is all in Somalia only. Somaliland. This is a disputed territory between Somalia and Somaliland. There is a dispute. The Somaliland want their own land. Like they want a separation. But right now this all comes under the Somalia. And this is Djibouti, Bab al Mandab. This is the pass. Sorry, we don't call it pass, we call it a strait. This is a strait of Bab al Mandab. This is Kotra island of Yemen. So this is Gulf of Aden. And on the world map, if you can see, this falls over here. Okay, this is India, and from here if you go, you'll reach at Gulf of Aden. This is Gulf of Aden. Okay, so in the northwest we have read this. Now let's move on to the next question and next topic, Integrated Theatre Command. An integrated theatre command emphasizes a unified command of the three services under a single commander for geographical areas that are of strategic and security concern. So basically it is a unified command of three services: Indian Air Force, Indian Navy and Indian Army. It is a unified command of three forces under a single commander for geographical areas that are of strategic and security concern. The commanders of such force will be able to bear all resources at its disposal from the Army, from the Indian Air Force and the Navy with seamless efficacy. The Integrated Theatre Command will not be answerable to individual services. So it will not be answerable to individual services. So earlier there was a criticism for the Indian defense system that all these three services act in silos. But after the Saketkar Committee's recommendation, the Integrated Theatre Command was set up. The integration and jointness of three forces will avoid duplication of resources. The resources available under each service will be available to other services too. The Saketkar Committee has recommended the creation of three integrated theatre commands: the Northern Command for the China border, Western Command for Pakistan border, and the Southern for maritime role. Why news? A high-level committee consisting of representatives from the services and the ministries concerned has been formed for wider consultation on the creation of integrated tri-services. Okay, so it becomes a little bit long, but we'll try to make it short from tomorrow. Thank you.